The month of July is here, which means players are going to be reporting for training camp in just a few weeks. But before that, let's go over some storylines to pay attention to for each team in the NFL. What's going on? I got Diggs Report here, back with another video, and another training camp is coming up. And like I said in the intro, I'm going to go over some storylines for every single NFL team. As always, we're going to start with the AFC East, and we're going to start off with the Buffalo Bills. Alright, so Buffalo had a big change this offseason, with Sean McDermott being let go as head coach and Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator, being promoted. So they decided to promote from within, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. How it's going to work out with Brady, we don't have the foggiest idea. We're not going to know until the season starts, but we can get an idea of what we could see with his coaching style during training camp and, of course, during the preseason. And Buffalo still has a talented team, so this team is going to be in contention. But is Brady the head coach to get them over the hump and get back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the 90s and finally win the Lombardi Trophy? I don't know. Now, that was not the only change that happened with Buffalo. They traded for wide receiver DJ Moore from the Chicago Bears. And DJ Moore, he's been an underrated receiver ever since the Carolina Panthers drafted him in the first round out of the University of Maryland. He has been a 1,000-yard machine since he came into the league. Really has been a dependable number one guy. And this is great for the Buffalo offense because they really needed that number one receiver. They have not had that for Josh Allen since they traded Stephon Diggs. But now Khalil Shakir gets dropped to number 2. Keon Coleman, they can take him out of the starting lineup and see if that can help jumpstart him somewhat. I don't know. I've seen stranger things happen. But for DJ Moore, getting him in this offense to pair with Josh Allen was essential. They really need to get over the hump. They want to get that first Lombardi for the city of Buffalo, and getting DJ Moore was a great move by them. And we're going to see the connection that Moore and Allen have. We're going to see parts of it during training camp. Probably not going to see it in the preseason. I'm willing to bet the Bills are going to rest their starters, but definitely we can see it early on when they're on the practice field. I do have one big concern with the Bills, and that's the defensive line. I think I mentioned this during my off-season videos. The fact is, Ed Oliver is the only player that has more than 2 years of NFL experience on that defensive line. Now, before any of you come after me, Bradley Chubb and Gregory Rousseau are listed as outside linebackers, not on the defensive line. So it is true. Ed Oliver is the only one on this defensive line that has more than 2 years of NFL experience. That kind of scares me a little bit because if Ed Oliver goes down, what happens with this defensive line? The trenches are so important in the NFL. And yes, they do 3 down linemen, not 4 down linemen, but still, you want experience on your defensive line. You want guys that you can depend on. I'm not sure what we can expect from this Buffalo defensive line. And again, when you're dealing with a lot of young guys, it's a lot of pressure that you're putting on them to make an impact. And I don't know. I feel like it could lead to some issues as the season goes on, but I could be wrong, and Buffalo's defense is going to be just fine. But that defensive line does kind of scare me just a little bit. Miami also changed head coaches, but that's the furthest thing from my mind right now. Yes, Jeff Hadney taking over as the head coach is a big storyline, but Malik Willis signed a 3-year deal with the Miami Dolphins, and I don't know what's going to happen with him this offseason. I want Malik Willis to work out. I want him to be a solid starting quarterback at the very least in the NFL. I'm a big Malik Willis guy. The problem is I don't know if Miami has the pieces in place to help him out, especially on the offensive line. I am hoping that Malik Willis can find a way to put together at least a solid season for Miami so that if they do end up with a top 5 pick and he does well, they don't have to worry about quarterback. They can go to another position, just take the best player available in the draft. But that's me being an optimist. And the pessimist in me is going, it's not going to be a good season for Willis. He might not last the full season. So I'm really concerned about Malik Willis with this Miami Dolphins team. Especially when they don't have Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle anymore. Hill was cut. Waddle was traded to the Denver Broncos. And who's left on this receiving core? Who's the number one guy? Tutu Atwell? Jalen Tolbert? There's not a lot of talent in this receiving core right now, so that's another concern that you have to have with Malik Willis as the starter, and just the Miami offense as a whole. Yeah, they got Devon Achane, but I don't know. It's just Miami's offense just does not look great going into the season. And of course, they could surprise us and they end up being one of the surprise teams in the NFL in 2026, but there's not a lot to really be excited about. And when I'm saying that, yeah, it's not looking great. And another thing I want to talk about is the secondary. Now, they drafted Chris Johnson in the first round at corner, and Dante Trader had a very solid rookie season, especially for a fifth-round pick, but there's a lot of new faces and young guys in this secondary. I'm going to put a list of names right here in this corner, and there's going to be a lot to expect from this secondary, especially with what these guys are. Chris Johnson is probably going to be expected to be the number one guy at corner as a rookie. That's a lot to handle. Dante Trader, they're probably going to be expecting a lot from him. They signed Lonnie Johnson in the offseason from Vegas. It's a lot to handle with the Dolphins, and just with this team as a whole, you do have to wonder if they're going to be in contention for the number one overall pick almost right away during this season. I mean, for the Dolphins, yeah, there's big changes, but how many more big changes are going to happen with them in the next few years? That's the biggest question in my mind. Okay, I'm going to say this about the Patriots. Yes, Mike Vrabel was in the storylines for all the wrong reasons during the offseason, especially around the draft. Yes, we know the story. It's been done to death. I'm not going over it again. I'm just not. It's not my business to really talk about that. And personally, I don't want to. I really don't. But what I do want to talk about is the chance of a Super Bowl hangover. They were the runner-ups. And sometimes when you're the runner-ups, you don't do as well the following year. In fact, we've seen that a lot with Super Bowl runner-ups. Even the Chiefs couldn't get away from that with what happened to them after they finished runner-up in the Super Bowl against the Eagles. Look what happened to them last year. So there is a real possibility of that. But for the Patriots, they can just keep this team together and put the offseason behind them. I think they would be okay. But it is something to keep in the back of your head. Can they avoid the Super Bowl hangover? Now, the biggest move that the Patriots made was one that they just did a few weeks ago. That was trading for A.J. Brown from the Philadelphia Eagles. And now that they have Brown to replace Stephon Diggs, but not only having Brown, but also having Romeo Doubs from the Packers, this receiving core is really, really solid at the very least. I love the idea of pairing A.J. Brown with Drake May, and then Romeo Doubs I think is a wonderful complement to what Brown can do on the field. I really like the moves that the Patriots did for the receiving core during the offseason. I think it's going to pay off wonderful for them, as well as continuing to develop Drake May after with what happened in the playoffs, because he did not play his best football. I'm not going to go over it again, Patriot fans. Don't worry. Not going to go in full detail. But having these guys joining this receiving core, it's just going to help the Patriots out a whole lot. Especially since you can't expect the defense to really repeat what they did last year. I mean, that defense was amazing, especially during the playoffs. I mean, the games against the Texans and the Broncos, they took over those games. All right? Keep in mind, the only touchdown that the Patriots scored against the Broncos were because of a play made by the defense. And yeah, I know Jarrett Stidham really made a bad decision, but the Patriots took advantage of that. They got the fumble, and then they went right into the end zone just a few plays later. And they were in it for the Seahawks for a good while before the Seahawks blew the doors open in that Super Bowl. You can't expect that kind of performance again from a defense, so adding to this offense does help take the pressure off of the defense. They did lose some pieces during the offseason as well. For the Patriots, I think this is, at the very least, a very solid team going into this season. They're going to be defending AFC champions, can they turn that into defending Super Bowl champions for 2027? We'll see. For the New York Jets, they did make a lot of moves during the offseason. But one that was surprising was not letting go of Aaron Glenn after the season that they had last year. They wanted to bring him back, and maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. All I know is it was not a good year for the Jets last year, and now they bring back their head coach that was leading them. We'll see what happens there. But one thing that they did do, they brought back Geno Smith. Geno Smith started his career with the Jets, and now he's back to help lead this team to continue to improve. Now, with Geno Smith, I don't know what to expect from him at this point of his career. When he was with Seattle, he was a very solid quarterback, but after the trade to the Raiders in 2025 was not a good year for Smith. He was one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL last year. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to expect from Smith. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Don't have the highest expectations, but I want to be surprised. I really do. Also with the Jets, they have a new look defense. Now, defense took a huge step back last year, and to help that out, they got Micah Fitzpatrick in the secondary for a team that had 0 interceptions last year. In 17 games, they had 0 interceptions. That should never happen. How that happened, I don't know. But that should never, ever, ever happen. 0 interceptions. Let's hope they don't go too long in 2026 without getting one. Bring back Demario Davis, who started his career as a Jet, spent all that time with the New Orleans Saints. Now he's back in Jet Green. And also bringing in David Bailey, 2nd overall pick. I do like the moves that the Jets made on defense. We shall see how quickly this team can come together and how quickly these pieces can start making an impact. But again, you made 0 interceptions last year. Don't do that again. Just don't. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the offensive line. The Jets' offensive line has not been amazing. It really hasn't. The last few years, they drafted Olufashanu and Membu, I'm hoping I said that right, with back-to-back first-round picks in 2 drafts in a row. And right now you want to see them really grow as bookend tackles. We shall see what happens there. Really, the Jets' offensive line, it just needs to be better. And for the Jets, you're hoping that they can really put the last decade behind them and start to look like a competitive and contender once again. You're hoping that's what's going to happen. How long is that going to be? No idea. But what I do know is that is everything I had to talk about with the AFC East. Next up is going to be the NFC East. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. And let me know what you think about this division down in the comments below.